This goes back to my very, very early days.
Okay.
And I became mayor, and of course, when you get elected mayor, you sort of assume that everything's going to go smoothly. It doesn't always happen that way. But I remember in the early days when council people would vote against me, I would have a tendency to write them off. And I did that for several months until it finally dawned on me that at this pace, everybody's going to be written off pretty fast, and I'm not going to have anybody voting for me. So I had to reevaluate that process, and finally came to the realization that even though people vote against me from time to time, you still down the road you have to deal with them again and again and again and again. So I think that provided me with somewhat of a more of a quietness and more of an acceptance that people aren't always going to agree with you on everything. But you may need them next month or 3 months from now.
Right.
Another funny story I can think of is we had a councilman that actually ran against me in 20 years ago, 93. Name was Sandy Rubino.
Okay.
And Sandy was on council, and then he was off for a while, and then somehow he came back on again. I think he got appointed, as I recall. But at any rate, one night I think he fashioned himself as somewhat of an orator, and so one night we were having some kind of a debate, and he got the floor, and he leaned back, and somehow his chair flipped out from underneath him, and he was actually under the chair, and his feet were up in the air like a turtle, that had got flipped upside down. And everybody laughed like crazy over Sandy, and I'm sure he was embarrassed by it.
Right,
but,
right.
I do remember that as an interesting, maybe a laughable time.
And that was during a council meeting.
Yes, yes. Probably back in the 90s. But I remember he came back, and he hadn't been back very long as an at-large council person, and then he did the big flip. But that's one funny story I do recall.
That's great.
And Newberry wasn't built yet. Newberry didn't get built till 56. So third, fourth, and fifth grade, I had to go to Lincoln, which was a mile and a half away. Now, in those days, there weren't any buses, and for the most part, every family had one car. They didn't have two cars. So the number of days that I got rides to Lincoln, I bet you I can count them on one hand and have a few fingers left over. I mean, it just didn't happen. So I walked to school and back every day a mile and a half each way. Now, I know it sounds like the old cliche of both, well, I'd have to walk uphill both ways, but I did have, and I'd end up at school, and sometimes, depending on the weather, I'd be soaking wet or, covered in mud, because there was no sidewalks. And I remember Silver Lake Avenue, right in front of Lions Park, that was a cow path. That was just a cow path. I mean, you had to be creative in figuring out a way to get to school. So, but then in sixth grade, as I was emerging, Newberry was built, and I was there the first year, 1956. Matter of fact, I was the original member of the schoolboy patrol that year. And so then I went to Newberry in sixth grade, Bolick in seventh, eighth, and ninth, because in those days that was junior high, it wasn't middle school. And then in 10th, of course, I went to the high school. And so, growing up here, it was really, it was like Mayberry RFD in a sense. I mean, we didn't have any crime. I mean, never had to worry about somebody kidnapping a kid, or that stuff just didn't happen. Or if it did, we weren't aware of it. I don't know. But to grow up where we did, next to Newberry, and be in the vicinity of Immaculate Heart, because back in those days, a lot of the Catholics moved into that area because of the proximity to Immaculate Heart. Well, if we wanted to get a football game together or something, all you had to do is go to 2 or 3 houses, because everybody had 8 or 9 kids. So we'd go across the street and play football, basketball, baseball, capture the flag. So in that sense, it was just a great place to grow up and see the city develop. So from my perspective, to watch the city grow and that sort of thing. When I became the mayor in 1986, everything was kind of natural for me. I mean, because I had that background, I had that advantage of having lived here as long as I had, and so that was big, that was huge, and being on the Merger Study Commission, I could just see how you had to have a vision for that northeast quadrant, so the city could continue to grow.